because it was Peter Jackson. And it turns out that there's 2 decent Hobbit movies out of those 3 movies.
I would say there's 0 decent Hobbit movies out of those 3.
Fine. I'm in the minority on that.
Any of them because I was unable to see the first one because I think that came out when I had my ankle broken, so I was not going to the movies. And then I just was like, I don't need to watch any of these. It worked out just fine.
The 28 frames per second thing is bad, but there are, I believe, 24 frames per second versions that came out after the fact for home video, and they're fine. The Battle of 5 Armies in those movies is pretty cool. That's the main.
How is the Eva opening only 29? That's bullshit.
Oh, don't worry. The rest of the list is bullshit too.
Oh.
The only part that's not bullshit is FMA at number 2.
Yep.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah, again by Yui is very good.
But man, whoever made these votes are.
Yeah.
They should be lambasted.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we can make this whole episode ranking the top 50 anime openings if you want.
No, I don't want to do that.
Alex and I
my
can
list
push,
of anime openings
further
is
than
like
universe to the top.
Oh, yeah.
I would just hang up.
Rock the Dragon at number 1. I got
that's a pretty decent
Yu Yu Hakusho opening.
I don't even remember the Yu Yu Hakusho opening, and that's one of my favorite anime of all time. So
it's fine. I mean, I think I've said this before that Yu Yu Hakusho doesn't really hold up as a new viewer.
But I have watched. Having watched like clips, it's all tournament shit, which is like, silly, but
that's the only thing I've seen. I just remember watching it on Toonami.
It's like 3 tournament arcs,
and like watching one episode, and it was all them just like doing a tournament, and like nothing happened, and I was like,
was it the Dark Tournament?
Maybe.
Oh no, you're a robot
I don't
again.
know.
Wasn't even Terminator's fault.
Yeah.
What could possibly be causing it? I don't have anything else open. Let's turn off anti-malware. Oh, actually, it's denied. Cool. Let's turn off Dropbox.
Did you plug in your RGB mouse pad?
No, I did not.
Alex is the most RGB gamer I know.
Yep.
I don't know. I have a lot of RGB stuff.
I find RGB stuff obnoxious.
RGB LT.
Wow. No.
Gamers rise up.
Is it still Robot-y?
Yep.
Weird. Pat's, for those watching at home, Pat's just showing us his wiener now.
Yeah, totally. Showing you my sick coordinated RGB
wiener.
Wiener. Yeah. I wish.
Yeah, I didn't know you could buy those.
King Pat's RGB wiener made you not robot-y.
Well, I reset it.
Scott keep pointing there all the time. But yeah, my headset and my headset, you can't see it because of the virtual background, and my mouse and my keyboard all synchronize their RGB lighting.
Oh, are they Corsair?
No, they're Logitech.
Razer.
Logitech. And when I play Total War Warhammer, my keyboard has a preset profile for it, and whenever I win a battle, it flashes green to congratulate me for winning a battle.
That's pretty good. If I go robot again, let me know.
Okay, you're fine now.
Yeah, it'll probably happen again. I think I can do more push-ups.
That'll be the signal.
Well, I wasn't watching. What was the signal?
You get like a.
Oh, okay, like a hula.
Yeah, and then like a football pass.
Okay.
What does that have to? Okay.
Because
it's a thing that I would obviously never do in sequence.
I'll just make my RGB wiener turn red.
Okay.
We'll let you know that you're a robot again.
It's too bad we're too early in the podcast for titles. Because
don't worry, I already figured that out.
You can always attach this to the end and
the RGB wiener.
All right.
Yep.
Is everybody ready?
Sure, why not?
Sam, I think I can do more push-ups than Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's pretty stupid.
I hope Joe Biden challenges someone to a push-up contest in the next 2 weeks and then has a heart attack and can't continue being.
We are streaming, Andre.
Die, but whatever. No one's watching. Maybe Erica's grandma.
American politics, we're fucked. There is no way to unfuck the situation, by the way, so I don't even think that would help.
Well, that's okay. Allison, did you get the news of the tweet that Pat read before you got here, which was, quote, "Symbolism behind Space Force flag is revealed as Trump touts the super duper missile"?
Oh my god.
Yeah, that face is about right.
Okay, well,
Joe Biden would call it the Malarkey missile.
Hi, I hate this.
Yeah, me too. Welcome to hell.
Yeah, that's what we're living in right now.
Yeah. Do you want to start the show?
I was about to. Hello, and welcome to hell. I mean, the Gaming Fix, episode 121 on May 16th, 2020. I'm your host, Andre Cole, aka your partner's favorite flip trick. I am joined today by Pat Cotter.
Yeah, I got nothing. We're in
hot
hell.
Off a Final Fantasy VII spoiler cast.
Yeah, I burned my any cleverness I had in the Final Fantasy VII. I was gonna make a Final Fantasy VII reference, but then I was like, no, we just did the spoiler cast. That's boring. And then in my brain,
different podcast.
I'm a ragdoll Viking.
Yeah, you are.
That was the voice of Alex.
I am a 360 pop shove it reverted into a varial kickflip into a double heel flip.
Oh no! Wait! I'm an MC Twist.
Oh,
I used to think that
McTwist?
was I think. Well, is it a McTwist or is it an MC Twist?
It's a McTwist.
Because I used to call it a McTwist, and people were like, "Wow, you're stupid."
Like,
it's not
if
what
you
it's
were
called.
like a skateboarding rapper, you could go by MC Twist and like skateboard through all your songs.
I just got told I was an idiot when I was a child for calling it a McTwist because there's no way there'd be a skateboard trick called something that's stupid.
Well, it was invented by Mr. McDonald.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's all
the
making
first
sense.
McDonald's. Yeah. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba, I'm loving it. Allison Saigan.
Whereas I had that similar experience, but with AT-ATs or AT-ATs, and I feel like I've had it both ways where people have said, you call it that, and I'm like, I don't even know anymore.
I would argue that Star Wars is a piece of fiction, and you can call them whatever the fuck you want, and that's true of Star Wars stuff in general. And
don't they call them AT-ATs in the cinema? In the film?
Yeah,
well, then
a lot of people call them AT-ATs.
Well, they're wrong because they're not in the movie.
Yeah, and I called them AT-ATs, and that's like, oh, it's AT-ATs. And then I said AT-ATs, and people are like, really? And I'm like, I don't even know anymore.
It's fine. It's people shouldn't feel ashamed for the things they call.
I think it's AT-ATs.
In Star Wars.
Hot
it
take.
is AT-ATs.
The
only acceptable alteration is if you got a shirt with a picture of an AT-AT, but it's been turned into a cat, so it says cat. That's okay.
I'm just gonna call them the sniper tank.
That's a different thing.
It's not what they are.
I know, it's the all-terrain armored transport, whatever. Sniper tank is such a stupid name, though. What is the sniper tank? I don't even remember anymore.
I don't think that's a Star Wars thing.
I think it is.
Well, there's ATSTs, but that doesn't stand for sniper tank. That's all-terrain scout transport.
The all-terrain attack pod, nicknamed the sniper tank.
Oh.
It's got a retractable third leg for stability, baby.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
All right. Well, we're off to a ripping start on this one. You know what, Alex? For that, you're going to start us off.
Oh, fantastic.
How about you tell us about the media and games you've been consuming?
Yeah, sure. This time I actually have a for real game that has more than like 20 minutes put into it, even though it's a game we've previously talked about.
Whoa.
Right? So
sniper tank in it?
No, there's no retractable third leg so far as I recall.
Dang.
So I have put a bunch more hours into a game I talked about a few weeks ago, and that game is XCOM Chimera Squad. Ooh. So I don't know. Have any of y'all checked it out?
No.
We just lost Pat, so he's the only one who might have.
I am intrigued, and I could see myself maybe picking it up, knowing that it's a bit more constrained than XCOM.
Yeah, I
And
kind
XCOM
of like
2 is nice, but
I kind of like the idea that that there's more, characterization that's already in there.
yes,
Mm.
a bit more Fire Emblem-y,
Yeah.
giving it like actual stakes behind who people are and trying to keep them alive.
Yeah, steaks and chicken breast. But did you guys play any of the more recent XCOMs, like Enemy Unknown,
I
etc.?
only played very little of the first recent XCOM.
I played like 3 missions of XCOM 2 and a few hours of XCOM 1.
Yeah, fair enough. So I've been a long time XCOM fan. Like I'm talking like Terror from the Deep and UFO Defense, like the old PC games. So that's for my own little personal history. I love Terror from the Deep. It's so good. And Enemy Unknown, when it came out, was a total revelation. Like it was just like, oh wow, they really modernized this in a great way. XCOM 2 I thought was really good, and War of the Chosen is excellent. So I was pretty hot on the more recent Firaxis XCOMs. So this kind of came out as a surprise drop, was it really positive. So yeah, I'm about 5 or 6 hours in now. From what I hear, it's about a 20-hour game. And the feelings I have so far is that it feels really good. Like in general, the XCOM combat, there we go. And like that general sense of strategy you get from XCOM games is 100% there, which is great for a $10 game. Like it still feels like similar to XCOM 2, I would say.
Now
more
20, but it was available for 10. Probably
Right.
will be again soon.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. During the introductory period, it was half off. It adds some new mechanics, which is neat for a budget title, or like budget compared to the full price games. It has the breach mechanic, which at the start of a mission, you choose where your agents enter the battlefield, and when they go in, like it can have some effects, like you're going to surprise the enemies on the other side, or like depending who's first, they might get a buff, and who's last, they might get a debuff and stuff like that. So there's usually like multiple breach points, so you can kind of min-max those buffs however you want. Pretty neat. It's a good way to make it a little bit more dynamic. And like Allison, like you were saying, the fact that now that there's discrete characters who have their own personalities, and actually that part is pretty awesome. Because like Firaxis and their writers were finally able to flex their chops a bit, like with the character interactions and stuff. Like the dialogue is generally really good and like clever and funny. It has way more personality than any of the previous ones, I would say. Like most of the personality from the old ones, in my opinion, came from like the commander or like the commander and who I forget the dude's name who always says commander, but
There's people at the base who aren't going out on missions and probably dying.
Yeah, totally. Like your doctors and your engineers, etc. Like they do have personality, and I would say that in general, like the personality in Chimera Squad is pretty fantastic. Like the humor they have is good, and like some of the kind of interstitial writing they have is pretty excellent. The setting is really cool. The fact that you're in a city, like you're confined to one city, like 30 years or something after the war. I can't remember. It's a significant amount of time after the war has ended. So now you have folks from every faction just kind of living together in relative peace. Obviously not exactly, but it's a really interesting setting. But all of that being said, I was struggling with it after a few hours. Like just like I didn't know if I wanted to continue, and that's purely a pacing problem. So the reason is, so something I love in the old XCOMs and like every old XCOM from UFO Defense all the way up to War of the Chosen is the opening moves, where you can kind of set up your squad like wherever you want, and like you can kind of see where the edges of the enemies will be, or sometimes you have hidden enemies, which is also cool. But the idea is like you can set up your own synchronized ambush wherever you want, you know? Like you're making the opening chess moves, and then when you're ready, you hit the button that's like, okay, let's pop this off, and then you're in a battle. So like you kind of set your own pace, and then those games also have different kind of mission objectives, which really make it more dynamic. So I would say XCOM 2's where you had to like diffuse stuff within a certain amount of turns was maybe the worst, but you know, sometimes you're destroying something, sometimes you're extracting someone, some you're like, you know, like they're all different. Sometimes the enemy's on the offensive towards you, sometimes you're sneaking up and going up on them. You know, it was very dynamic, as mentioned. But with this, every single round starts with a breach. So there's never an opportunity for those opening moments of just like setting up that big old ambush. Yeah, everyone is a breach. Everyone is immediately in combat. Everyone, you always know where every enemy is right from the start. So there's no surprises.
But isn't a breach a big old ambush?
Yeah, but you're not really setting it up. Like you don't have that much control over it. And like, it's just kind of the same thing every time. So 2 hours in, I was like, this was fun the first 2 or 3 times, but now the 10th or 11th time, it's exactly the same. So I was kind of bummed on it. So I kind of stepped away from it for a couple days and came back. And actually, after coming back, I enjoyed it a bit more, which is weird. And that's when I realized I was thinking of the game the wrong way. I was thinking of it like a standard normal XCOM game, but you kind of have to recontextualize it as a more casual game. Like it's kind of the game you sit down with for 20 minutes or 30 minutes rather than like, you know, binging. And yeah, like if you really want a really quick strategy fix, you can just go in there for 30 minutes, 45 minutes and be good. And
is
then
that our new podcast?
Strategy fix? Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, coming back to it as like a bite-sized XCOM, I think it's actually really good for that. But I think if you're going to go into it, have that in mind. Like, don't think of it like a full-ass XCOM. Yeah. So that's basically where I fell on it. I'm going to continue with it. Probably not be touching it like 24/7, but yeah, come back with it in 30-minute chunks.
All right. Sounds good. You saying all that makes me definitely interested in checking it out. The more I hear about it, the more I'm like, maybe I should give it a try. It's
not
good. Super expensive, so
yeah, it's fun. If you like strategy games, it's a pretty easy recommendation. And if you like sexy snakes, then also a pretty easy recommendation.
Oh well, before I was like, but sexy snakes. Well, now I'm in.
Come for the strategy.
Right after I finish Anime Standing.
Yeah, it's good. There is some, you can kind of see the budget in some places, especially with the art. Like the in-game art where you're like shooting your guns at shit and all the characters, they look good, but they're kind of visual novel-y, like characters popping up on screen and having dialogue. That art kind of looks like it was drawn by what's his name from Higurashi with ham hands. Like it has that same kind of vibe of being kind of terrible.
It's funny. My dad's a huge XCOM fan, and he was like, "Well, the strategy stuff is cool. It's cool that they changed it up, but I really don't like any of the like dialogue or world stuff." And I was like, "Ooh, I think that's the stuff that's really going to be prevalent in the next com."
Probably.
I think that this is kind of, I get the impression that Chimera Squad is definitely like here's a bunch of different stuff and let's test and see what people really like, while still providing like an affordable, enjoyable, kind of shorter experience. And I suspect we'll see some of that stuff carry over. I'm really interested to play it at some point. I haven't gotten around to it, but the characters sound really cool. That's the thing for me that
they are
that I'm into.
Yeah, and you get to. Oh, sorry. Go for it.
The XCOM is super replayable, right? Because there's so many different strategies you can take, and so much of it is procedural. I feel like even if this is a little less random of a game than XCOM proper, the fact that there's the different characters means you could like play through it with the different characters and get a totally different dynamic in the missions, which is cool.
Yeah, totally. And those characters, they do play off of each other, and they have like dialogue between each other, which is really like unique and fun, and it's cool. I kind of almost prefer it over, you know, naming your friends and putting them in there, because they're just kind of avatars at that point.
It was an interesting. We've been watching a lot of Josh Sawyer, who is a developer at Obsidian Entertainment. He His first big game that he was one of the leads on, I believe he was the lead on it, was Icewind Dale 2. So he's been around for quite a while in the RPG space. He's the game director on Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2. I believe he was the director of both of those. Anyway, he's been streaming a game called Darklands from the early 90s based on the RPG source books of the same name, set in medieval Europe. And on one of his streams, somebody was like, so do you like randomized characters where you're like just naming them yourself and stuff, or do you like characters with written story? And his response was that if the writing is good, pre-made characters are great, but that the writing is usually bad in games that have pre-made characters, which I totally agree with. So when it's good writing, I would much prefer to have pre-made characters with sort of injected personalities that are written, but it's just that they're bad a lot. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah. But it sounds like this, like, I know the Waypoint crew was pretty hot on the writing and dialogue in this game, which they're pretty critical and have pretty high standards for that kind of stuff. So between I'm saying that, and I know you do too. Yeah. That's encouraging.
Yeah. So that's XCOM Chimera Squad. Can recommend.
Great.
The other thing that I finished, what we've been talking about for like a month, and then briefly in like last year or something, is Legend of the Galactic Heroes, the very long anime that started in the 80s and ended in the 90s, and like mid 80s and late 90s. So it took 10 years for them to finish it.
But like not consistently putting it out like as like a weekly thing. It was like
they
a
released
season
it
per year or something, or I guess it was all one season. But
yeah, it's all one season. They kind of released it like every 2 or 3 years as basically almost like direct to DVD, well, VHS kind of collections.
Okay.
I don't think it was ever just airing on TV. So far as I'm aware. But yeah, Legend of the Galactic Heroes. I have finished all 110 episodes of the core series. Something that surprised me was after all of that, I felt like it could have even been longer, honestly. Like, I think I mentioned before that something I was worried about was pacing. Like maybe it would be really slow and boring because it's a long anime and it's like one story that whole way through. But no, the pacing is fast throughout, and it's really strong. It has lots of twists and turns, like really great characters. The like contextual universe they built is awesome. Like I honestly don't have much criticism of the show, like apart from like some super minor nitpicks that don't really matter. Basically, like if you want Star Wars with way better writing, deep political intrigue, and like this overarching story that seems like it might have inspired George R.R. Martin, you should probably watch that show.
I don't know if I want that.
No, I'm saying it might have inspired. It's not. It's better than his writing.
Okay.
Yeah, like it's really good. Like that, they're not afraid to kill super major characters, like the ones with frontline billing on the posters. So it's really interesting in that way. It's really good. I'm considering watching the movies and the side series now, but maybe not right now.
I think I watched like, I don't know, the first 100 episodes or something like that a long time ago, so I don't remember a lot of the plot beats, but I remember it being very high quality. And the only thing, we talked about this briefly in the Final Fantasy VII spoiler cast, is it felt to me like there was, in the same way that Game of Thrones does it, that there were moments where it was like these major characters are dying because no one is safe, and I was very much like, okay, I get it, yes, that's real rough. But it's been so long that I don't know how I would approach it and like how I would respond to it now. But I remember that was the one thing I didn't like about it at the time, was like, you don't have to kill characters just to prove to me that you're willing to kill characters. And that was something that I didn't like about Game of Thrones also. That's kind of why I was like, I don't know if I need that, because I generally don't like that as a thing in fiction. But looking back, I think I probably just was also it was a long time ago that I watched it too. And that it's probably more sound narratively than I remember.
Yeah, I would say it's worth rewatching then, because the way they kill like some of the main characters and the impact that has for the rest of the show feels like they wrote the ending first and then worked backwards and then connected all the ties rather than
Sure.
it seeming kind of random. Like that's always kind of how I saw Game of Thrones. It's like kind of like how Lost felt like it was writing its plot episode by episode and then trying to tie the ties just like to make some sort of logical consistency. Like that's also kind of how I've seen Game of Thrones. I haven't watched Game of Thrones. I don't really care about it. I've tried to watch it, didn't like it. But Legend of the Galactic Heroes, it feels like one of the major character deaths in like episode 20 or 30 or somewhere in that range happens, and then it gets referenced for the next 70 episodes. Like not directly like every episode. It's just like, oh shit, if that guy was here, like this was the impetus for all of this other stuff kicking off, and like that becomes its own major arc. Like it feels like character deaths actually have total meaning and that they were like very deliberate parts of this story that felt really natural. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So like I agree with where you're coming from in terms of how other series have done it, but I think this one handles it really, really strongly.
Yeah, I think there's just anytime, I'm not arguing with you either because I haven't watched it recently, so I don't have the same context, but anytime someone sells something to me as none of the characters are safe, I'm less so with you because I have a lot of respect for where you're coming from with those kinds of statements. But for the most part, when I hear that from people, I kind of go like, nope, don't care. Not interested.
I wouldn't say that's a selling point. Like I feel like when people say that with Game of Thrones, they're like, oh, check out how edgy this is.
Exactly.
Or check out like how shocking.
That's what I'm getting at.
Like
exactly.
Red Wedding, nobody's safe. Like it's less like actual, interesting character. Even though I liked a lot of Game of Thrones.
Sure. And it's fine if people like Game of Thrones. I'm not saying you should like what you like. I'm not saying that people shouldn't like Game of Thrones, but I remember the selling point for the, like,
right.
I watched the first season and thought the first season was good. And the character death that happens at the end of the first season is very much a, like, this makes sense. This is like
it
narratively
makes a lot
impactful. And then there was some stuff early in the second season I just didn't find interesting and didn't even really try to watch the second season. And then some friends of mine showed me the Red Wedding scene as a thing that they thought was going to be like, oh, you'll want to watch it now. And I was like, this sucks.
Really.
This is bad. This is stupid. This is all just shock value, like kill your favorites so that you get angry at the show. This is like, are you hate watching this at this point? And they were all kind of like, well, yeah. And I'm like, okay, I have better
people
things to do with
certainly
my
got
time.
there. I stopped watching quite a few multiple seasons before the end because it wasn't good anymore, I thought. And then the last season was like actively terrible. But
I think part of it too is I remember when one of my favorite shows is the more modern Battlestar Galactica series, and that's a show that deals with a lot of major character deaths as well. And at the time, there were people who tried to sell that show as like no one is safe, and it always made me really frustrated because it's like that's not the point. The point is not, oh, we're so edgy and we'll kill anyone. The point is that the character deaths are not like part of that. So that's interesting to me, and I might try to give it a rewatch at some point. I've been exercise biking, and playing games while on the exercise bike has been fun, but also I'm starting to look for like other stuff to do while I'm doing that. So
yeah, can recommend that one then. It's a great story, and I think it which is so rare with media, and especially comparing it to Game of Thrones, it has a good ending, which feels internally consistent, and it leaves things in a place where it's very satisfying.
Cool.
Which is why I wanted it to be longer, because it's like, man, I would have loved to even like dive deeper on some of this other stuff because these characters are so fucking good.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Anyways, yeah, Legend of Galactic Heroes, that is now done. And that's basically it for me. Did other stuff, but we don't have to talk about work.
All right. It's probably NDAs and shit there.
Yeah, if you want to go breaking NDAs, let's do it.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, let's continue the animated show talk. Yeah, we're here. Let's let's roll into it with Allison. You
Okay,
finished a show.
I did. So
Is it-
yes,
Season or series?
series.
Series finale.
So yesterday, the series finale for She-Ra and the Princesses of Power dropped. I've actually I've watched this entire series within the past couple weeks, actually. But
This is Netflix, right?
Yep, Netflix. And guys, it is extremely good.
That's what I've heard.
And you should watch it. Like, it's,
Cool.
I think I was unprepared for how good I would think it was.
Mhm.
But then it really blew me away. And then season 5, which was the last season, got a lot, like, went in some really interesting places, characters wise, but also interesting places, and that a decent amount of it happens in space. So it's like gets a little sci-fi now, which I was not expecting. But it's genuine. I think that's one of the things that kind of weirdly connects it to what you've been talking about, Alex, where I feel like all of the characters are genuinely super interesting, to the point where there's the main characters that you obviously care about, but there are like almost all of the side characters just are really well written and are really interesting, and you would watch an entire series about, you know, each of those kind of side characters.
Totally.
And there's multiple different like there's definite interesting, like it goes like so many more interesting places than you'd kind of assume a cartoon that is presumably made for children would go, but it does it in a really, really well way. And they also have been planning, from what I understand, have basically planned the entire series from the start. So this was the last season, but it was very much planned to be this length and this story, which worked out really well. So there's I really don't want to spoil things, but like honestly, if you're looking for a good show, I would definitely recommend it. It really surprised me. Like season 1 is like it starts and it's like, okay, this is kind of charming, but it's not necessarily blowing my mind. But then it really keeps going and evolving in interesting ways that I thought was pretty unexpected, and does some things that I think are pretty extraordinary for a cartoon made presumably for children. So definitely recommend you guys watch She-Ra, the new She-Ra, because I honestly did not think I was going to get this attached to it, but you know.
Is She-Ra related to He-Man for some reason?
Like in the original in the like for when they originally made it, She-Ra was the like female counterpart in the 80s to He-Man, but I think that there's some legal weird issues now, so that when they made this series, they couldn't do any references to He-Man stuff, from what I understand, because I think He-Man and She-Ra are owned by different companies now.
Of course.
You know, like in the whole kind of weird Marvel thing, like where they own different things, even though they're still they're connected. So the She-Ra series doesn't reference anything He-Man at all, but
yeah, okay,
it's cool though. I wouldn't expect that for something whose genesis comes out of an 80s cartoon, like such as He-Man.
Well, see, that's the thing too, is that they still use basically all the characters are from the 80s show. I think maybe there's a couple that were created, but like most of them are from the original 80s show or from like the various toy lines, because it was one of those shows that was created to sell toys. And all of the names are there. So it really sounds like cheesy at times. Like my sibling got me into this, and we were like talking about it at dinner, and it's like talking about where you're talking about characters like Princess Glimmer and like, you know, like just various like very kind of cheesy 80s names. There's one character who's a sorcerer whose name is literally Castaspella. So
What?
and it's like you're taking yeah, I know.
I love that.
No, it's good. Yeah, it's very funny.
Yeah. So it's like you take, but it's like they took this like these characters and this like kind of 80s cheese and like turned it into like a remarkably good show, which is like, I don't know how they did it. It's kind of amazing. It's kind of like a miracle that they managed to make it all work.
Does it play it straight throughout, or does it kind of take a deconstruction-y kind of turn?
It's mostly played straight. There are a couple of times where I think they kind of highlight some of the weird stuff, but like some of the characters aren't necessarily always played straight. Like there's her talking horse Swiftwind, and they definitely play a lot of jokes about like you know, wait, that horse is talking. Is this new? But it's there's a lot of like, the other thing that's just really interesting is just like the characters are written so well that all of the interpersonal relationships are really interesting. Like they kind of, because there is like this kind of political thing like that's going on. Like they have a war they're fighting, but people might change sides, and just seeing how the interactions change based off of that can be really good. There are a couple of characters that were interacting in season 5 that hadn't really before, and we're like, and my sibling and I were like, I didn't know I needed this, but this works completely with the characterization. So it's like, yeah. And there's also some good queer representation in it, which is extremely good. I don't want to like spoil too much, but they make things canon, and it's good.
Cool. That's rare.
Yeah. I might have to like share with anybody who doesn't mind spoilers after the cast, because I'm just still like kind of buzzing about it. But it's like it's also just like super nuanced in certain ways. So I'm like, yeah, it's very good. I feel like I keep saying that, but it's very good, and I totally recommend it.
Awesome.
I might actually go watch more cartoons because my sibling and I have been watching this, and it's been really fun. So
there's a fascinating documentary called By the Power of Grayskull that's about He-Man.
Hell yeah.
And like the toy line, and kind of speaks to the stuff you're talking about, how like originally this stuff was made to sell toys.
Right.
And there's a great line in it that I can't remember, but like it's like the creator is like, they were the reason that He-Man has like a green cat as his like mount is because they were already making that toy for a different line, so they just used green plastic instead.
Wow.
And the creator in the documentary, the creator is like, I don't know, put him on a fucking tiger. And it's very funny. I will also warn people, if you're trying to find that clip, do not search He-Man fucking tiger, because you're going to get some stuff that you don't want to. Well, I'm presuming you don't want to. I didn't want to see.
I really don't want to see that. I'm sorry.
Fucking tiger.
Oh God, Alex, you
Images.
To do it on Bing.
I didn't go into images because the web results were enough to make me go,
There's nothing that crazy here. Oh.
Okay.
Okay. What?
Okay.
That's not something you would normally have on a saddle.
I think we can move on.
Well, you also played a game, Allison.
I did. I also played a game, which is
We've got a bit of a theme on this episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spoilers, if you don't look at the timestamps, you're going to get a bunch of similar games right now.
Yeah. So I've been playing Assassin's Creed Syndicate. I already played this on PS4 like quite a while ago. But because we were talking about Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and I was just kind of feeling it. Syndicate was still on sale on Steam, and it was, I think, like $9. So I decided to pick it up again and have been playing it. And guys, that is a good game.
Yeah, it is.
So a lot of people it's kind of like the last hurrah for the original kind of style of Assassin's Creed before they moved to more open worldy type things in Origins and Odyssey. But I really kind of perfects that formula in a really interesting way.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of like weirdly just kind of takes the Assassin's Creed formula and it's like, okay, how are we going to make this the the exact kind of perfect Assassin's Creed game? So it's been really fun to revisit. I actively really like both of the main characters, Jacob and Evie. They're both really fun. And I don't remember if other Assassin's Creed games have this, but you can launch a zip line, and that makes that's like a game changer for exploration.
That was exclusive to
Yes. That's part of that was like the biggest new feature, if I recall, was the zipline traversal stuff.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but I couldn't remember it in any other games. But guys, it is like night and day. Like, so nice to have to have something like that, so you can you don't necessarily need to go, okay, I'm at the top of a large building, there's another large building over there, but there's not a lot of like stuff in between. It allows for a lot more interesting kind of exploration, and for some large, like, you don't need to create certain landmarks or certain things. I think it works really well. I
think one of the reasons it's so important is because the like, if you go back through the series, Assassin's Creed 1, 2, Brotherhood, and Revelations were all based in fairly ancient cities that have very narrow streets. So you could have poke like a thing out on either building, and then it made sense that a very acrobatic assassin could jump across a street, like could jump from one building to the other. Whereas and then like that continued into Assassin's Creed 3, which had a lot of tree stuff.
The tree stuff in 3 was actually pretty cool.
Yeah, and I've actually been thinking about going back and playing that remaster on PC, because I think if it was better performance, I would have a lot better time with that game.
I do have pretty fond memories of some of the tree stuff, so I get it.
And 3 is just to jump in, 3 is a bad game, but the traversal was not the reason it was bad.
Yeah.
AC4, moves to a lot of the boat stuff, and there's still more tree stuff in it and stuff. So like Syndicate, though, was sort of the first one that was dealing with closer to modern environment. So they had to come up with a way to make it so you could cross these streets that are designed for like carriages and stuff.
Right. And I think that
works.
And that's kind of one of the things that I really like so much about Syndicate is the environment feels so good to traverse around it. I really enjoy, like, that's one of the things I like best about the Assassin's Creed series is just the kind of exploring around in an interesting environment, historical period. Like, I think we were talking about this, how there's not really other series that are doing kind of similar, where you're like, let's explore around this new place, an interesting time frame. So I've always really liked that, especially even in like Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood. But Syndicate's London feels just so good to go around, and it's so it feels very like it feels like just like a really great environment. So I I just really love that game. I haven't gotten too far. I'm a few hours in, I think, because I got the grappling hook zip line, and it's opening up more, but it's I think genuinely like a really great game. So even if I feel like a lot of people maybe didn't play it or kind of discounted it because Assassin's Creed was still doing the, hey, we're going to be a yearly release title, which is kind of like, did anybody really need that?
The one
Unity
before it was
burned
a
lot of goodwill.
Which is unfortunate because Unity's actually a pretty fun game now after they fixed all the technical stuff. Like it's a pretty cool.
But nobody remembers that, especially with the yearly release games.
Yeah,
when they fix them, like
right. And so but yes, that's part of I think why Syndicate was such a like. And remember, Syndicate got announced. Well, it didn't get announced; it got leaked. Syndicate, that was the one that Schreier leaked the existence of Syndicate, leaked the photos from it. And then people flipped out because they were like, well, Unity's still broken. How can they be working on another one? Then it was this whole like shitstorm of like
how Ubisoft works.
Every person at Ubisoft should be fixing Unity. And it's like, that's not how video games work.
They don't make Unity, damn it.
And they did fix Unity over time. It's just, it took until like Syndicate came out.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that joke was terrible.
But yeah, no, I think it got kind of laid at the weight, like people a lot. It's kind of forgotten, which is kind of a shame because if somebody asked me, hey, what Assassin's Creed game before Origins would you recommend? I would probably still talk about Syndicate.
Yeah.
Not even just because it's the most recent, but I think that it kind of figures that formula out kind of perfectly. So
yeah, I think if you're someone if anyone said I've played all of them except for the most recent two, and I think if you're someone who's like, wow, there's like 15 Assassin's Creed games, I don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. I want to play one of the ones before Origin. What should I play? I would definitely point you to Syndicate, which is saying something because I think Brotherhood is a phenomenal game.
Yeah, I have like a lot of like really good kind of nostalgic feeling for like the whole 2 series.
Yeah, but I think Syndicate still refines that stuff to such a fine point that it's definitely the one to play if you either played Brotherhood and liked it and want to play another one like that, or if you're new to the series and want to touch something from before Origins. So yeah, it's a great game.
Yeah, so I've been having a lot of fun revisiting it, and recommend other people check it out too if that's something they're interested in. Especially if you're whenever there's another Steam sale, you can get it for pretty not too much money.
You can get it on Epic pretty cheap right now too. It was like $8 or something.
Probably cheap on the Uplay store as well, right?
It's
now.
probably cheap in general,
except on Stadia if it's there.
What I will say is I have very rich memory of the characters because the characters are excellent. Mm-hmm. I could not tell you the plot of that game at this point.
Yeah,
if you put a gun to my head, like
right now, like I'm still like I'm like multiple hours in, and the plot is still kind of like, oh no, we're gonna take over London, and I'm like, okay,
that's kind of I mean, it's very like. It's very much a game about style and character arc over actual storyline. So you should, if you do play it, I still think you should play it because mechanically it's so fun and there's so much to do and the world is so rich and the characters are so good. So all along you're still getting pretty good writing that is like fun, but the plot and narrative is not super strong, which is true of a lot of Assassin's Creed games. I think there are only a few of them that have pretty strong narrative plots in like the main story part. So the whole
we need to take back London thing kind of feels very much like, okay, we're trying to find a way to justify the kind of Ubisoft move to this new area. Here's a tower.
There's a crime boss, and you gotta save the district. That kind of stuff. And
I do find that kind of that formula pretty compelling. Like I know that's been played out by Ubisoft. But you know, the whole like, okay, we're gonna take over this whole area, and here's this map, and you see here's how much completion you have. Like, there's something very kind of, you know, satisfying about the
And
about getting a map, and it's like, oh, here's all the places that you've taken over, here's all the places that you haven't, here's your like total map is 42%, and you're like, oh man, I'm almost to 50.
Yeah, and I will say it's definitely not like bad. Like I remember Assassin's Creed 3's plot because it's terrible.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's just kind of slight. I mean, like,
Yeah,
honestly,
it's
like
just limited.
like I'm several hours in and I'm like, I don't know, I don't really care. Like, I don't really like, I'm playing it now and I'm like, I don't really care about the plot. I just kind of want to see more character interactions with Jacob and Evie and see them meet more historical figures. So,
and that stuff is very fun. There's a lot of, I don't even want to spoil it if you haven't played it, because for people who haven't played it, because like the characters at first you might go, London in the Industrial Revolution, who am I gonna, what, that doesn't sound interesting.
You meet a lot of cool
they pull people in that you're like, oh right, that person, that's funny.
Yeah, and there are a couple of people, like, even though I've already played this, I'm like, oh yeah, that guy was in here, all right.
Yeah,
and the writing is just genuinely so kind of fun and charming that it's nice to meet all of those characters. So it's yeah.
Yeah, this is, I haven't really followed Assassin's Creed that much since probably about Brotherhood. This is the last one before they really turned into RPGs, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like, it's kind of the last one that maintains that kind of feel of, 1, 2, 3 to an extent.
Yeah.
So
it's also the last one that focuses on the Desmond line.
Oh, I didn't know Desmond was still involved at that point.
He's not really
it's
from
like
the
fallout from his story, kind of.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, and their characters are still, if I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, Allison, their characters are still tied to Edward Kenway's lineage.
Oh,
so
probably.
they just mentioned it very briefly.
It's a very thin tie. It's like,
yeah,
Edward Kenway is a great uncle or something.
Some of the and a couple of the characters from the Desmond kind of outside thing showed up, and I was like, oh hey, you guys are still doing this, huh? But it's like extremely slight. It's a lot less present than say in like 2,
right?
Where it was a lot.
And part of that's because it's one where they were continuing to go forward for such a long time. Like they start in the first Assassin's Creed. From then on, every game is moving forward in time through historical settings. So that's part of it is, you're getting like thinner and thinner connections to Altair that still exist. And then with Origins, that's when they were like, nope, this has no, Desmond comes up in passing because he's still part of the greater lore, but it's a total reboot in terms of like the characters that matter. In fact, the Assassin's Creed movie
is just like, no,
the Assassin's Creed movie is pretty integral to the story of Assassin's Creed Origins, which I love. It's amazing. I think it's so great that you got to go watch this shitty ass movie if you want the full picture. Shitty ass movie that I enjoy watching because it's still pretty beautiful at times. Like there's still some shots and moments and action sequences that are great in that movie. It's just terrible story and terrible script.
Hey Pat, you're pretty beautiful at times too.
Thanks. You too.
Anybody remember that Kristen Bell was in Assassin's Creed?
Nope.
Yep.
Forgot that.
I did remember that actually.
I thought about that a while ago and I was like, huh.
Also, you don't really have to watch the movie. They actually recap the important stuff for you in Origins. So,
did they play clips from the movie?
No,
that'd be good.
No, they should. I don't think
they can't afford the Michael Fassbender licensing.
They don't reference Michael Fassbender's character at all. They reference Marion Cotillard's character, though.
If you get 100% in Origins, could you watch the movie in full?
That's the secret movie where if you collect all the feathers in Origins, that's what you get at the end.
Yeah, you get just like the whole movie.
What was the one where you could sit on the couch with someone and just watch the entirety of To Kill a Mockingbird? Was that The Darkness?
What?
Was that The Darkness or The Darkness 2, I think?
It sounds like I don't know.
They should totally do that. They should totally do that in an Assassin's Creed game where you watch the Assassin's Creed movie and just fucking blow its own lore up so much.
What's funny is that Origins actually recovers that and makes it so that the lore implications of the movie are not as fucked as they seemed like they were going to be.
So it like
Interesting.
immediately retconned the movie.
No, it doesn't retcon it. It just shapes that context into something that's a little. It shapes it into more of like, yeah, this is one thing that Abstergo is doing. Abstergo does all kinds of shit all over the world.
Make video games with Ubisoft.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, this is a weird story, but as I'm playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and I find myself missing like the more stealthy, like stealth focused gameplay of Syndicate and like those earlier games.
For so long,
I'm
I
having
did
fun, but
yeah.
It's interesting because, I'm kind of in a blender of Assassin's Creed because I'm also playing Origins. Origins still has a lot of stealth stuff. You don't have to play it that way, but at least as far as I am in it, you can take most of the like stuff you can do stealthily if you choose to. You can either just go in and fight, or you can be stealthy.
But also you can't like assassinate most people because they're like, you can take down like 3/4 of their health, but you're not going to kill them with your blade because of like all the RPGs. Like,
that's not a thing in
your stuff, and
that's interesting. In Origins, you can take people out from the very first, like right at the beginning. You can sneak up behind them and push Y, and then they're out.
As there are some people you can do it to, but people like, this person's a level higher than you, so you.
That's not a thing in Origins. In Origins,
remember it being a thing in there.
It is, but I've encountered in 5 hours back into the game, I've encountered that one time in Origins. One enemy that was higher level.
Encountering it one time where I go to stab a blade into a person's neck, and then they're just like, nah, fam.
But in Origins,
that doesn't feel great.
Where I'm at in Origins, you don't even have a blade yet. It's when you assassinate people, you're like just like knocking them out. Basically, he's not even killing them. They're like getting taken out and dropped in the bushes or whatever. So it's sort of different.
Well, in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I'm throwing a magic spear into people's necks from like 20 feet away and then teleporting to them. So,
I mean, we're kind of consolidating Odyssey and Origins into its own thing, it seems.
Yeah,
but
that's
like,
fine.
Yeah.
Like, do you miss the stealth? Like, do they ever, or second question, unrelated, I guess, but are there moments of stealth?
I think there still are.
Stealth around. Yeah, you can stealth around. And if you go into like a base or like a fort or whatever, you're probably going to be better off stealthing around because there's like 20 dudes walking around, and you don't want to get all of them like shooting arrows at you and surrounding you. And I think part of it's because the way the world is set up now, since it's so much more open, and like it's a lot of like, oh, here's a little city or like a little like village, and then here's another little village a ways away, but in between there's like bandits and stuff. And so I'm like, oh, I'm riding my horse, and then there's some bandits, and I just like want to like run around on some rooftops, but there's not a lot of rooftops to run around on.
Yeah,
there's definitely not a lot of rooftops to run around on in Origins, the place that I'm in. I know that you go to Alexandria, and I'm pretty sure Alexandria is more of a like Assassin's Creed city that has a little bit more of that rooftop stuff.
I'm sure once I get to like Athens, it'll be like that.
One of the big changes with the Origins Odyssey thing that makes it less roof running aroundy is in the older Assassin's Creed games, you had to find handholds to move between, really. Right. Like it was very much like you can't climb this thing. This thing is not climbable because it's a sheer face that doesn't have
you can't climb it in this spot.
But in Origins so far, I have not found a surface that I can't climb.
You can Spider-Man up anything.
They do a good job of making it like, at least in Origins, like, oh yeah, there's cracks in the brick between that you're grabbing into that is unrealistic, but at least it's like not literally a sheer face that Bayek is just kind of like Spider-Manning on, but it still doesn't have any challenge for how you approach climbing stuff. Like it's very much like, even if it's like there's a rock cliff face and it'll be like, yeah, he can climb it.
It's like these characters are just covered in baby oil and have no friction, and they can just slide up anything any obstacle that comes in their path.
My point with the saying is like cracks in the brick. It doesn't look stupid. It looks like I don't know. Maybe in Odyssey it gets kind of silly, but in Origins it looks believable for this ancient world superhero to do this, but it still is not like the way climbing worked in the older games, which I think is one of the things that's probably the thing I miss the most, personally.
I don't mind like the being able to climb up anything. It's because it's nice to just be able to get in, especially because the world is so big.
Exactly. That's what I was going to follow that up with. Is I think I don't think they should go back to that, because with the format of these games, it would be very tedious to have to try to find the correct spot to climb.
Yeah.
So
I want like a denser areas with like more buildings and the ability to like actually have to like stealth around and do like, nobody wants to do like the tailing missions because those are bad, but like blend into crowds more and actually feel like I have to assassinate a person instead of running into a base and just like doing, sword swings over and over until I kill some people. And then, that's like a huge part of this game is just doing I can't even remember I think they're conquests. You do like military battles.
I would maybe recommend bumping the difficulty up if you haven't tried that. If only because I know for me playing Origins, I played like an hour of it and did one of the camps, and I fucked up my stealth, had someone see me on the normal difficulty. There were other people like 25 feet away. I killed the person that saw me loudly, like in combat. And then I snuck up behind the other two and assassinated them. And I was like, that was really, really easy for me to do. So I tried bumping it up to hard. And then all of a sudden it's like I've died like once on hard. So I'm not saying that hard is like super, super challenging, but it at least feels a little bit more like you have to think when you're fighting. It's not quite, you can't just like mash the attack like you can on normal. It's much more like, well, if you don't block, you're going to get killed. And so that improved the experience for me a little bit. But I know also that might make it more tedious if you're trying to like burn through tons of the conquest scenarios.
You have to for like the story stuff, but I'm just enjoying like getting back into it. I played like 4 hours a year and a half, 2 years ago. When did it come out? The year they were doing the beta for Stadia. That's when I did it. So I guess like a year and a half ago. And then I didn't touch it again until like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And I'm getting back into it because I didn't restart. I just like started my save. I'm like, okay, how do I play this game again? And I'm like, it's challenging to figure out like, okay, I've got all these abilities. Which ones do I actually want? How do I do stealth again? Is there even a point? But I'm enjoying the world a whole lot.
Yeah.
Like Greece is like beautiful in this game. And now I'm like looking at like, okay, how much would it cost to do like a chartered trip around the Mediterranean on like boat? That'd be real great.
Yeah, it is
expensive. But someday maybe.
It's really interesting.
Because like Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood are what drove me to like take a gap year and go to Venice and Rome and other parts of Europe. So
yeah, I really want to go to Greece someday, but I this is making me want to play Odyssey again too, because it's even though the formula is different and there are certain elements where I'm like, I'm never going to go to Assassin's Creed for the combat, but it's just fun to be in that kind of atmosphere in that world. So I kind of want to go back and play it now.
Yeah. And I think one thing that's nice for these times is you can get these games pretty affordably. And like I got Odyssey, the Ultimate Pack, for like $35 on sale a month ago, which is not an insignificant amount of money, but at the same time, that's like the pack that has everything in it.
And given the amount of content,
that's what I was gonna say. Is it's probably 150 hours of gameplay in that pack. They are potentially meaty games. You can play through them in like 30 to 40 hours if you just want to do the story, but they're potentially very, very thick with two C's games if you want to really get time out of them.
I'm also lucky in that I got because I played on the Stadia beta, I got the XP multiplier, which is nice because you get like 50% bonus XP.
Yeah, that was a weird thing. You don't have to do a lot of grinding. Yeah, that was a weird thing built into Odyssey specifically, I think. Sorry, Alex, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say the hashtag thickness from it seems to come from how it was kind of inspired by Witcher 3 in some ways, which at least from the outside looking in, it seems as though it is. I don't know if that's actually true. It's
less true than the world makes it seem, but still, I think that was their inspiration. Yeah,
but right. It's a big open world where you talk to people and get quests, and you have some side quests, and there's yellow text in the dialogue trees.
Sure.
I think for the combat, I think they looked a lot to Souls games. It's way simpler than Souls games, so I'm not saying that it's like Souls games, but I think that's kind of what they, based on the control scheme, I think that's a lot of where they came at the combat from. It's not nearly as good as in Souls games, of course, but and then yes, there are elements of The Witcher with the way it is structured, but sort of to your point, Andre, I think like there's not a lot of different ways to do a big third-person open world RPG. So I think any game that does that is going to bear some resemblance to The Witcher 3 because it was sort of the one that did a lot of that stuff first this generation. And I think I would actually compare Assassin's Creed more to, or Origins at least, more to an MMO than to The Witcher almost, because it has that feeling of the combat is better than in most MMOs that I've played, but it definitely has that feeling of like you're riding around and then you see someone that has a quest on your map and then you go get that quest, and then the quest is like, go off and I need you to recover this thing from this tomb, and then you go to the tomb and you fight some bandits and get the thing.
Oh no. That made me significantly less interested.
Or in Odyssey, you go and you're like, hey old lady, what's up? And she's like, well, the Oracle told me to stay young. I have to like rekindle the young spirit within myself. And so I need you to go get some bear scrotum and deer tongue so I can make an elixir for my husband so he can fuck me better.
All right, I'm back in.
So,
and you can flirt with the old lady, regardless of their gender or regardless of your character's gender. And it's, boy,
not that I don't think you would necessarily like these games that much, Alex, but I will say, I don't think you have to play them at all like you play an MMO. Like, you're not going into town necessarily picking up 10 quests and then going out and doing them all and then coming back.
Yeah.
You kind of can do that, but it is much more like you're getting a quest and you're doing it, and it's not like kill 10 boars or anything. And I think you can totally
bandits.
You can not engage with that stuff and just focus on playing the main story stuff if you want to, and then it feels more like a narrative RPG, I think. But I guess what I'm getting at is, as much as I like Origins and I'm excited for Valhalla because I like this formula a lot, the thing with The Witcher is like every side quest practically is like you're getting some rich story about a person or a town or like the history of a ruin or something like that. Like the Witcher 3 is a very high bar, in my opinion anyway. And so I think, yes, there's structural comparisons that you can make, but I haven't seen anything that's not true. The opening narrative beats of Origins are really fucking good and definitely on par with some of the stuff that's present in The Witcher. But on the whole, I don't think that it's necessarily like on that level of quality from a writing and narrative perspective.
Sure.
So I will say the opening of Origins is one of the roughest things I have seen in a video game, and provides motivation for that character beyond anything I've encountered in a Ubisoft style game before, at least. It is really, really intense, and actually, like, if you have kids, worth a content warning, I think, in the sense that I almost think they should have put one on the beginning of that game, because holy shit, it's rough.
Yeah, they really went for it at the but with the beginning of Origins.
It's well
But I
done
think-
too. So I think
yeah.
it's good, but it's yeah. One of my friends who has kids who started playing it, and I was like, hey, you need to know this is a thing that happens very early in this game, and it's hard to watch.
Yeah. But I think I can't remember. I remember having problems with the way they handled some of like the freedom they give you with like in terms of choices in Origins, and Odyssey has a similar problem where I'm just like, I don't know how I feel about all these choices I'm making. And you're playing as a mercenary in Odyssey, and you can play both sides of a conflict of the war between the Athenians and the Spartans.
That's the Peloponnesian
And
War.
There's no reason, like you can basically, your choices can be, I want to play this side because they're going to attack in like the conquest or whatever, and I'll get more rewards. Or I can play the other side and I can defend and it'll be easier. And maybe the story stuff gets more interesting as you do that. But it is a bit of a letdown that the story choices seem so shallow.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a, it gets to that, like, it's not The Witcher. Like that's the thing, is it's not like when you make choices in The Witcher, The Witcher is the kind of game that for me, when I played The Witcher 3, I had to put the controller down and like stare at a dialogue option for 5 minutes before I could make a decision as to what I was going to say. This is not that kind of game. It's pretty shallow in that respect, but and I will say,
feels so like old fashioned with the way it does that stuff.
I enjoy the lore stuff out of the Animus from the perspective of, I'm one of the weirdos that thinks that stuff is really entertaining, even if I don't think it's particularly good. The writing for the character that you play as out of the Animus in Origins is not good, like aggressively not good. Like she's like, rad, I'm hella stoked to be here in this cave. And you're just like,
I'm back in.
No. Like,
perfect.
Abstergo knows that I'm a rebel. I have always been one and I always will be. And it's like,
oh boy.
There's very good representation happening here, but at the same time, and it's clearly a talented voice actress, but the script they gave you is not good. So I would say that some of that stuff in general, I think these games are like really interesting, diverse open worlds in terms of the environments they portray, and they're very pretty and they're fun to move through. And I think the combat is fun enough that it's like enjoyable to play through them. So I don't think it's like a huge condemnation that some of the writing and story stuff is not the best.
No, definitely. But it is just, when people compare it to The Witcher, I'm like,
yes, I'm the same. Yeah, I have the same, like, we had a conversation because Sam was playing a little bit of it, and we had a conversation where he was kind of talking about how, like, well, it's just The Witcher, but in Greece. And I'm just like, it's missing the core parts of The Witcher that make The Witcher The Witcher, though.
Yeah.
But I think on a surface level, if you haven't sat with the characters in The Witcher for the amount of time that I have, at least, I think that maybe it's easier on the surface to see it as The Witcher, but in Greece. So
yeah,
sure, yeah. Again, that's outside looking in, but
right.
I'm sure when the moment to moment must be much different.
Right. I will say, I think the combat in Origins and Odyssey is as good as it is in The Witcher. I mean, The Witcher has pretty boring combat, in my opinion.
I don't know if I can block, parry. I haven't figured out if there's a button for that. I can.
There definitely isn't. In Origins, it's left bumper. You block and parry with left bumper.
That pulls up my my like combat skills, and I've got like a charge thing and like my Leonidas spear and then like a kick.
I would hope you can block. Maybe the combat changed a lot in Odyssey. In Origins, I would say
if I hit square on the PlayStation controller, I dodge, and then if I dodge at the right time, I get like slow down, and I can be like, but no block. but maybe I forgot in the year and a half since I played it.
It's also just possible the combat changed from Origins to Odyssey in a way that I didn't recognize or didn't know about. In Origins, I would say the combat is pretty, it gets pretty like, okay, there's 3 guys. I got to make sure I'm blocking the right one and then dodging. And if I use a spear, I have a sweeping attack, I can hit more of them, but it won't do as much damage versus if I switch to my sword, I can kill one faster. So I think the combat's pretty decent in Origins compared to something like The Witcher, because I think that's probably the weakest part of The Witcher 3.
Well, I think that'll do it for our Assassin's Creed discussion.
Yeah.
But you've got some more games, Pat.
Yeah, my other ones are fairly quick. I haven't spent a ton of time with one of them, and the other one I just wanted to mention something silly. So I'll get out of the way. I've been playing some Total War Warhammer 2. That's a game I played tons and tons of Shogun Total War and the Medieval Total War games and the Rome Total War games. So I have a lot of background in Total War. I didn't play that much Empire or Napoleon. And I have a background in liking Warhammer, but Total War Warhammer has always kind of been a thing that I want to play and like way more than I do, or I want to play more than I do. I like it a lot, but it's so complicated because you're taking an already complex war game in Total War and then adding like, by the way, this race this faction has like a phoenix, and this faction has like plague ghouls that do this effect. So it can be kind of daunting. But I'm finally at a point now where I have all the basic mechanics. They also totally changed the way the whole game is structured with the first Total War Warhammer. And so there was a lot of relearning to be done. But I finally have all those basic changes to the mechanics so second nature at this point, after dozens of hours with the 2 games, that I'm feeling comfortable with it. So like, I'll run through this quickly, but basically like the structure of those games in terms of how you pick a faction is there are different factions. So in Total War Warhammer, it's like you have dwarves and you have elves and you have humans and you have vampire courts or whatever. There's all these different factions. Within each faction, there are several legendary lords is what they're called. Then there's dozens of them. Each of them has a different they have the same basic units as other legendary lords in their faction, but they all play differently. They all have different strategies. This character might focus on court intrigue. This character might have campaign movement bonuses and have the ability to teleport across the map or something. Like they're pretty significant differences to more than just numbers. So that's where a lot of their DLC is positioned, is to introduce more of these legendary lords with a couple of bigger factional packs. So they have a new DLC coming out called the Lord, and the character in it that's funny is Grom the Paunch. It's called The Warden and the Paunch is the DLC. Grom the Paunch is a like ogre, and he's an orc lord. And his mechanic, to give you an idea of how wild this game is getting with the stuff they're adding, is that he has a cauldron, and as you fight battles, you have a unique interface to this character where you put different pieces of meat and other stuff in the cauldron, and then he eats it, and over the course of the campaign, it alters his abilities and skills. So if he eats certain things, he becomes a more powerful magic user. If he eats other things, he can become more powerful in other ways, maybe better leadership stuff, maybe better attack abilities. And there's like cooking recipes and stuff that you have to discover and learn to give him the proper food.
That's weird.
Yeah.
That sounds very mechanical.
Strange. It is. It's so strange. It's like there's nothing else in the entire game that functions like that. This has never been a thing before. So I don't know. That game is very cool. If you're into really, really complex strategy games, I think it's totally worth a look. And I would say since the last time that I had really dug into it, they have this really neat thing called quest battles now, where if you don't want to start with a campaign, you can actually play individual sort of preset battles with a little bit of narrative setup. For each of the legendary lords has at least like one, and so there's, I don't know, 100 of them or so that you can play through, and it gives you sort of an overview of different factions, units, and abilities before you commit to playing one for a campaign. So recommend Total War Warhammer 2. I'm excited to see what happens with the third one because it's supposed to be a trilogy, so there's one more coming.
So one thing about older Total War games that I remember is that there's a family tree. Does that exist in Warhammer 2?
No, because this time scale is different. Okay. It's things like medieval Total War, for example. It was core to that because there's a little bit of Crusader Kings in there. Of you're operating over the course of like a couple hundred years in a campaign, so people are going to live and die. In Total War Warhammer, I don't even know if the time scale is defined in terms of how long a turn is, but it's definitely not. You're dealing with characters who are major figures in Warhammer lore. So like Malekith is the leader of the Dark Elves, and if you choose to play as Malekith, you're going to have Malekith for your whole campaign, and that's just the way that it works. So it doesn't have the same like family tree dynasty stuff. And like I said, they changed so much of the structure of how the game works. Like it's all region based now, where there's a capital. This is true of Three Kingdoms also. And it's very cool. There's like a capital, and then there'll be supporting settlements. And like to unify a region means that you get better resources and stuff from the region, and construction is tied to the different settlements in different parts of the region. So like the whole campaign system in general is vastly different than the way it worked in the older Total War games. But for all I know, there might be a legendary lord in the game that does operate with some sort of family tree style mechanic, because like I said, there's bespoke mechanics for like tons of these different lords. Sometimes it's as simple as like, oh, they have this one rides a griffin, this one rides a dragon. But then sometimes it's as complex as this one has an entire cooking mechanic that no other character in the game interacts with.
Yeah,
so
that's neat though.
Yeah,
cool.
It's cool. Yeah, I think it's worth it. I will say they did a great job of you better keep up with this DLC, because like if you own Total War Warhammer 1 and 2, you can play with both of them combined on this enormous world map that has all the races from both games in it and all the DLC from both games in it. And if you were to purchase all of the games and all their DLC at their like store price, you're looking at like $300 or $400, I think. Because like no, between 200 and 300, but still it's a lot. Like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 $9 DLC packs for Total War Warhammer 2, and then 2 $20 expansions.
Oh geez, yeah.
And then there's all that kind of stuff for the first Total War Warhammer. So I don't know, it's kind of hard to.
Well, there'll be a Steam sale coming up soon.
That's how I recommend people get into it if they're interested in it. But I will also say you don't need to buy. Yeah, it looks like there is $75 of DLC for the first one. You don't really need to. I would say if you have an interest in it, just get the base Total War Warhammer 2. There's plenty of game there, and then you can kind of add stuff in as you want to. I think that the base, you shouldn't start by playing the big, huge campaign that includes everything. And Total War Warhammer 2's campaign is a lot better than the first games. Yeah, it's not like it's super hard to get into from a purchase standpoint, but just know there's a lot of, it's not quite train simulators, but there's a lot of extra characters and factions and stuff you can buy. So that's that. The other thing I've been touching on, I played very little of. How many people in this call are fans of Human Head?
I like my Human Head.
Elaborate.
Who here's played Prey?
Hell yeah! Like you mean the one from like 2000?
The arcane game. Yeah.
I mean the original
from like 2007.
Prey. Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Native American,
where you get tiny and go in a jukebox.
Gets abducted.
With Tommy.
Yes.
Yeah.
That game was okay. It was interesting.
They
Did some cool ideas.
Brink and Defiance.
Did they make Brink? Yeah, okay, they did. Because I always think of Brink as a splash damage thing.
Oh, I just looked it up. They also made The Quiet Man.
Oh yeah.
Did they made the quiet? Oh,
Yeah,
I forgot about
God.
that. I forgot they were the ones who made that. Oh, that makes me even more excited about the thing that I'm playing right now. So
Totally forgot about The Quiet Man. That game is
So if
amazing.
you
Oh,
have,
man.
if you haven't
Remember
been
when
paying
The Quiet Man came out?
Oh, wow. If you haven't been paying attention to the Epic Store, there's one, I think, an interesting. Jeff Grubb from VentureBeat was tweeting about this. I think it was Jeff Grubb, maybe not, but
He tweets a lot.
no, it wasn't Jeff. It was, I think it was Anton Hand, developer of Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades, was talking about this. I think that's who it was. That the Epic Game Store is such an interesting place because there's tons of like AA tier games there that you would have never heard of, that you would have no idea existed. They don't get any kind of marketing push. There's like a lot of them. Like, did you know that the new Soren Johnson game is now out on the Epic Game Store?
Who?
Soren Johnson is the lead designer on Civilization 4. Which is like one of the best strategy games of all time.
Preach.
And his new game's on the Epic Game Store. You can buy it right now and play it if you want to. I've heard it's pretty good.
Called?
It's called Old World. It's technically in early access, but
is the Amazon game New World?
Yes.
Well, I know what I'm going to play. I'm going to play the New World, not the Old World.
I guarantee you
it's
Old World
better.
is a better game. But yeah, I mean, there's just stuff like there's this like Before We Leave game. That's a really cool looking game about settling on other planets. Industries of Titan came out there, which is a game.
A lot of games
kind of hyped.
Building.
Totally. Lots of like of stuff where you build things.
Anno. Heavily featured,
and Anno is at least a Ubisoft game that has some lineage, but like, there's this game called Surviving the Aftermath that looks great, that is like a colony builder in a post-apocalypse that's a little friendlier than Frostpunk. So there's all these games coming out. So one of the on the Epic Game Store that are like AA kind of B gamey things that are very interesting. One of the games that came out there is a game called Rune 2. Has anyone played the original Rune? It is not a good video game.
Well, I honestly don't even know what it is.
I
saw it on our list and I was like, huh?
Rune originally was a very rough, I don't know, I guess it was, it got bad reviews. A very rough human head action game that came out in 2000. And you like played as a Viking, and you fought between like, there was about the war between Odin and Loki and stuff. And it wasn't very good. And Rune 2 is also not very good.
Keeping up that old Rune legacy.
But it's such an interesting thing, and I'm so glad that I spent $10 on it. So I got it because they're basically showering you with $10 coupons on Epic.
Yeah.
After buying it, I looked and I had gotten another $10 coupon. So you basically get a $10 coupon for redeeming GTA 5, and then another $10 coupon every time you buy something. Cool. So like it's basically like you get $10 off every purchase. And it's Epic's way, I believe the way they're doing it is it's their way of tracking what hit they're taking and what hit developers are taking. Like they're not taking money. When you apply that coupon, Epic takes the margin hit. They don't actually like make the developer pay any amount. That's my understanding anyway. That's how they've always done these sales in the past. So that's part of why they have this weird, like, get a $10 coupon every time you buy something. So I use it to buy a Rune 2, which is already on sale for $20. And then I use the coupon on it. And part of the reason is because I'm just so curious to follow that thing's remaining lifespan, because it actually sells itself as something that I would love there to be more of, which is sort of Assassin's Creed is another one of these kind of, but like make Destiny, but with swords instead of guns. That's kind of a thing that I'm into right now. The idea of that is make a servicey game where you can play, and this is what Assassin's Creed is missing, play it multiplayer, co-op with friends, but you're like swinging swords instead of shooting guns. I think that's very fun. I'm excited for that Gearbox Godfall game.
Gotta